So one perennial challenge that we all face when we're trying to do layout is to center things, and centering part of the challenge of centering horizontally at least is recognizing what you're dealing with. If you're dealing with text, you center one way, and then if you're dealing with block level elements, then you tend to center a different way. So let's begin here just by way of illustration. Here we have some lorem ipsum text wrapped inside a div. And let's target the div with a CSS selector. And if we use the property text align center, that text effectively is centered on the web page. It's probably the effect we're looking for. Works fine in this particular circumstance. But now let's do this. Let's add a border around our div. Just to see what we're looking at. Effectively, since the div extends the entire length of the viewport, when we apply text align center, the text aligns within the div, and because the div takes up the entire viewport width, the text is effectively aligned in the page as well. But if we start manipulating our div, maybe we don't want to let it extend the entire width of the viewport. Let's just let it extend 200 px. Then we still have center text, but it's no longer centered in the page because our div is no longer centered. And you could go, well, maybe if we did this, if we did body into text align center, something might, that would then apply to the div, but it doesn't because, because text align really applies to text. It doesn't apply to a div. So there needs to be a different way of actually centering your div in these circumstances. And this applies to all block level elements that have widths. You would need to use a margin. You would do margin auto. And now, and what this is effectively saying is apply the same margin on the left and the right hand side of the div. And so that effectively centers the div on the page, and then the text is effectively also automatically centered on the page because it too has been centered. Of course, you might, depending on how you're going about your layout, you might have something like this going on, where you remember to center your div, but you're still trying to center the text, and that's where then you have to remember to add text align center, like so. An additional wrinkle worth sort of remembering is that, yes, of course, we should use margin auto when we're trying to center block level elements, and text align when we're trying to center text. I mean, that just sort of is intuitively what we expect to use on text, right? The text align property. But another thing to remember is text align property is what you'd want to use on pretty much any inline element. So let's actually let me demonstrate that. So let's create a span, which is not a block element. It's an inline element, and now let's style this span a little bit. Okay. Let's we want to be able to apply the sort of the behaviors and properties of the box model to it. So in order to do that, we have to we can't do that to inline elements. We have to make them give them that block property. So we'll call it inline block. All right. All right. So now we can apply a width and a height to it. And let's give it a background color. And now we have our span. So how would you actually go about trying to center this? Well, if you think of it as a block level element, then you should probably apply margin auto, right? So that you get the same margins on your right and your left. Let's try that. And it doesn't work. And that's because it's still an inline element. And because it's an inline element, to center it, we use the text align property. And so let's take it out. And we apply that to the body tag, which is sort of the parent tag of this span. We go body, and now we go text align center. Now we center our inline block element. Now you probably won't run into this particular situation all the time, but anyway, I'm just adding that in there as a sort of a watch out, because most of the time you can just sort of remember, oh, text align center, use that on text, and margin auto on div elements. But then there's these edge cases where where you're working with inline elements. And in those circumstances, remember that you're going to have to, if you want to center them, you're going to need to use text align center.